So, and welcome to another episode of Rebel City Podcast. This week's guest is Sharon Brand from Recovery Dundee. How's it going, Sharon?
Fine, how are you?
Fresh off your interview with Jeremy Vine.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, and you.
It's weird that I think the last sort of 4 weeks we went to, don't know if you've seen the podcast Drunk Therapy. It's like a Glasgow podcast, but we went to their sub crawl and I met a couple of guys that I've only spoke to on Twitter, and it seems to be the last sort of 4 weeks has been taken up with just meeting people that I've spoke to online, and it's getting less weird.
That's good, yeah.
Like you were saying when we first met.
Yeah,
You're like, thought you were smart, thought you were a wee bit smaller, nah. Well, fortunately or unfortunately. Yeah. So, Sharon, do you want to just tell the listeners who you are and what Recovery Dundee is?
So, Recovery Dundee was the first independent recovery community, I'd say in the UK, but I'll stay safe and say Scotland. We still are the only independent recovery community that exists. Everything else is connected to fellowship or NHS or a service. We've looked at recovery communities across the world and seen that they're run by peers and funded by social enterprise, and that's what we want to achieve here. So we support people in and out of treatment, families, kids, young people that have never even touched drugs but are maybe affected by it. So really a whole community of support, with peers supporting each other, that's it. Really.
So, I mean, have you had your own experience with addiction?
I was a heroin addict for 7 years and I was on methadone for 3. I've been off methadone for 3 years, and I've been clean from heroin, I think, probably 7 years. Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
That's outstanding.
Thanks, yeah.
It's incredible. I mean, it's such it's a life-ruining drug, really.
Yeah, I think I was quite lucky. I had a point of reference. I never started using heroin until I was 27. I'd been to uni, I'd lived a life, I'd lived in London, I'd done... So I had a point of reference to go back to. If we find, especially in Dundee, a lot of the people that we support have maybe not had that point of reference. They've maybe been quite young and never actually lived as adults and functioning and contributing. So yeah, it's I've been pretty lucky, I think. Yeah.
I think just to sort of fill some of the listeners in as well, you were featured recently in the sort of Scotland Today thing, and you know, people wondering why we're talking about Dundee when we normally sort of talk about Glasgow, and obviously, you know, quite a sort of small snapshot of what you do, and kind of when we seen it, we were like, wow, these guys look brilliant, and kind of want to get into a bit more detail. So like, you know, kind of like some of the peer-to-peer services that we talk about quite often about mental health and stuff like that. Like, you're saying you're the only recovery. Or independent
yeah.
recovery. So
yeah, a lot of the recovery communities that exist now were probably set up, I'd say about 12 or 13 years ago. Initially, the Scottish Recovery Consortium was created, put together for that reason, and they've done a great job of it. But every single recovery community that we know of is connected to the fellowship in some way. We wanted to offer, when somebody's coming out of treatment, give them an overall look, so you're not guiding anybody, they're finding their journey themselves. So we kind of see ourselves as a buffer between treatment and the community and community and treatment. So instead of somebody going all the way back to a service, they could come to us instead of having to go back into treatment or something, and then vice versa. We're activists as well. We cause a lot of trouble sometimes.
I like to hear that.
Yeah.
So in terms of the services that you provide, I mean, is there a couple of examples?
We're not a service, I'll just say that. No, I get it. We try to stay away from that. We do obviously offer support, and people would describe it as a service, maybe an organisation, but for us, I think, especially in Dundee, the services have stayed the same way for 30 years. So we want to distinguish a difference between the two of us, so that we see them as treatment-based recovery, and we're the recovery community. We believe that a service can never be a community. It never can be a recovery community.
So what support then does your recovery community provide, just to give people examples to contextualise
online support. So we've got people in Australia and New York that we speak to, that we support online, all over Scotland, down south. And then we do one-to-one support. We've got group activities, personal training, art, music. We do an open mic once a month. We have a recovery cafe once a week. And then the main group meet once a week as well. So yeah,
So busy then.
quite busy.
Sounds really familiar to like pretty much all the community-based
Yeah.
mental health.
Yes.
No services, but groups that are popping up where it's centred around sort of connection, fitness, well-being, education,
All the
and
good stuff.
just making people feel part of something
But it
rather
also
than just like
sounds-
isolated.
It also sounds as though it's driven out of all of the things that drive these other groups that we're talking about, because it sounds to me as though you're looking towards quite a lengthy, gap in these actual official services that you're talking about. You said, it's been, decades that some people have essentially just been parked and put to one side.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we have our own addiction and recovery stories that we've covered at length in the past, and we'll not waste time getting into, but like, never to the extent where, we were parked on something like methadone for years at a time. You know what I mean? Like, and that to me feels as though I don't know how we qualify that as a cure or a fix or whatever it is. Like, I don't know if there's, how do they classify it? I mean, do they classify having somebody parked on methadone as them being treated or them being recovered?
So I know people that have been on methadone for 30 years that have been told they're in recovery. And if you're trying to explain to somebody that's been on methadone for 30 years that they've not experienced anything until they've took their last dose of methadone and moved forward, it's quite difficult. They've sold it like that so that they've made it more difficult for people to get better, I think, in the past. That's changing slightly.
Okay.
And they're starting to understand what recovery entails. But even in Dundee, they still, like, I went to a meeting about 3 weeks ago with the council, and this group has been meeting for over a year.
Okay.
It's based on resilient communities, and
It's a really cool buzzword.
for the whole of that meeting, I was sort of speaking and trying to explain the stuff that they're trying to do, how it wouldn't work or it would work, and it blew my mind that these people are getting paid. They've got jobs, they're based on recovery, and they don't have a clue what the fuck they're doing. Like, honestly.
Don't know what
it's
recovery looks like by the sounds of it.
Definitely not. I think it's quite a new word for Scotland. Recovery it's in its infancy as far as, I don't know, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Like 10 years in, you're just starting to get the gist of it. But that's not even happened because they've blurred the lines between treatment and getting better. So they say treatment is recovery, and that fucks you up. Like,
Yeah.
Definitely.
So it's like a something that's almost used to manipulate statistics and make it look like there's progress,
I
but
mean,
the
they
actual
don't even-
reality is
yeah.
nowhere near that.
They don't even have a proper figure of how many people are on methadone. They take an optimal dose and divide that by how much they're giving out. So I was on 25 mil, and any other people are on 60, 70.
Okay.
Optimal dose would be 50. So there's a huge gap between what some people are taking and what others are. So they've not even got a clear picture
So
about
even the guesstimate is wildly inaccurate.
Yes, 100%.
And that's crazy that you would have a city the size of Dundee and
And-
not have any idea who is.
Even the figures that are given out by the NHS and that, they're very deceiving because the only reason they know them is if somebody's engaged with them. And a huge majority of people that are addicted don't engage with services. Like
No.
a lot of people that we work with are people that would never go to the NHS for support or that. So the figures are very deceiving, like in my view. I've said that
So they're
many
skewed
times.
before anybody even starts to play with them,
Yeah.
essentially.
What is the sort of statistical or like what is the best practice way to help somebody with a recovery?
Allow them to figure it out themselves and just give them room to do that. Like, and obviously you need people with experience who've been through that so that you've got a point of reference.
Yep.
Somebody that's never experienced can never possibly give you that advice or show you a way that might work for you, or you could do that way and adapt it for. That's what usually happens. People take bits and pieces of what other people have done and create their own. But in a service, it's very regimental, it's very punitive, and you don't have that freedom. Like, if you don't go appointments, you get your prescription stopped. If you're not engaging, you get your prescription stopped. If you're antisocial at the pharmacy, you get banned. Like, it's a very punitive system of care. And
It's a weird juxtaposition there that you would punish somebody whilst trying to treat or care for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't see how that's anything other than sort of counterproductive.
I think it comes from the fact it's illegal to take drugs, and I think the stigma carries on through whoever works in that service, and it filters down. It's a societal thing, I think.
Almost an institutional bias in a lot of respects.
Yeah.
Do you think that opinion's the ship's starting to turn?
100%, yeah. I think since I started 3 years ago, there's a lot happened. Even in Dundee, like the small pockets of things that are changing, and even attitudes of people that I've spoke to before in media are now coming round to a different way of thinking and approaching it in a different way. I think it's going to take about 5 years for anything that we're doing right now to be truly effective. But that's just my personal opinion on that. Yeah.
It must be.
Sorry,
it must be pretty. I mean, when I think back, and I've spoke about this before in the podcast, I'm not judging myself in any way, but when I think about my own attitude, I mean, I grew up in a council scheme, so did Matt. The general attitude towards addicts in the scheme was that they're scum. Really, that is, to put it horribly, but that is the language that you used. I mean,
they were written off.
Yeah, exactly. And when I think back to some of the people and some of the families that the guys and like women that came for it, I mean, they never had a chance. They really never had a fucking chance.
To be an
Absolutely.
addict before they even went to school, probably.
I think we
Absolutely.
we've seen this in the Scotland today, that in Dundee there's, and I'm sure there are as many examples elsewhere in the country, but just because we're talking about Dundee, like, where heroin use is multi-generational. Like,
Yes, it is. I think right now we've got a crack epidemic in Dundee. So, and it scares me because the drug service is set up for opiate addiction. So anything over and above that, you've not got a hope in hell of getting support from it. And crack is, I warned them 2 years ago how bad it would get, and it's at that point already.
Right.
And I don't know how they're going to deal with that because they can't even deal with what they're doing.
so the system that's not even tooled to deal with heroin addiction is absolutely in no way, shape or form ready to deal with crack.
Definitely not. 100%
frightening.
not. Even like they had a blanket ban on Valium in 2015 in Tayside, and that is when we seen the explosion of the fake, what they call the fake Valium.
Yeah.
They're not even fake Valium. but
Fake
they're-
benzos and
Yeah, it is I think it's therapine or something like that. I don't know. But even now, if somebody goes and presents and says they've got an issue with Valium, and they take a drug test, there's no Valium in their system, which they know that's going to happen because they
course.
already know that the Valium isn't Valium.
Yeah.
And then they tell that person they can't support them or they can't detox them because they wouldn't prescribe them Valium for something that's not. Yeah.
It's like a pure just going round in circles.
Yeah. Chasing your tail.
That's
absolutely. It sounds like it's more about statistics than it is about actual people coming forward.
and their actual experiences.
The point that I was going to make about my attitude towards it was indicative of everybody's attitude towards
Yes.
addicts and the schemes. And what must it be like for somebody that wants to come forward for help, but even when they cross their front door into what's supposed to be their home, they're met with remarks and abuse. I mean, we used to give people abuse, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not proud of it whatsoever, do you know what I mean? But it's a good way for me to look back and think, man, fuck, do you know what I mean? Like, must be horrible, like, if you are isolated in like a council flat in the East End of Glasgow, and you maybe are wanting to scream for help, and all that you get met with is either abuse for the people that are running about you,
just to be totally dehumanised.
exactly, the GP maybe, you know, looking down his nose at you or whatever it is, and then getting put on methadone and then just left there for fucking 30 years. I can't even imagine what.
My brain
how it would
struggles to
feel.
compute that, so it does. Like, I
We've
don't
got a family
get how
now
that is
that's
allowed to happen.
Yeah, we've got a family now that's 4 generations in, and that's like the story of most families in Dundee that have got 4 generations now of addicts or someone that's been addicted, and it's scary because the young people that are coming, there's not like if you're there educating children about drugs, they're showing them what they are and telling them how to take them, and where you get them from and who. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
The education isn't as it should be. I think the stigma and discrimination, part of it is media, like they're criminalised, and it's against the law to take drugs, so people take a dim view on it anyway before you even start. And then of course you change physically, you change mentally, your appearance changes, so as soon as somebody sees that you're using drugs, then you're kind of isolated from your own community, and that's where the issues are.
Ostracised.
That's where the issues lie. But I think housing schemes now, I think there's more people addicted than there's not.
Really? I think we're at the worst. Do you think we're worse than what we were in like the early 90s when...
I can't comment on that because obviously I
Who knows?
Yeah, it could have been.
I think that I remember looking at the time when we
I've
talk about like the statistics on Scottish drug deaths of late. Somebody had put on Twitter that this is the worst period for addiction deaths in Scotland's history, and I was thinking back and going, I can remember The Walking Dead, like in the early 90s, and how can that be true?
Depends
but
on
then
when statistics start and end.
people
and all these
then
types of
went,
things,
oh,
you know
but they
what I mean?
didn't record that, and I was like, right, so that
Or
even
even-
that's fucking crazy.
yeah.
Or even now they find ways to record it in manners that they shouldn't.
Yeah,
You know what
I think that if you think back then, that it was a fairly new issue then, so people really didn't know how to deal with it, and they were just scrambling about to find the best way possible, and methadone seemed like the answer then, and it's probably saved a lot of lives and stopped bloodborne viruses and stuff like that, but society's changed tremendously since then. The way of life for everybody has changed. How we live our lives has changed. I think that's still in the dark ages compared to now, but one of the members has been addicted since she was 15, and she's now away to be in her 50s, and she remembers back then, and it was bad. It was really bad. But
In terms of like Dundee itself, like what is it? What do you think? Is it poverty? Is
Poverty
it
is a huge
Is it
factor.
availability? Is it?
that as well.
Is there anything? Like, I don't know.
Kids
like,
now, it's easier to buy cocaine than it is to go in the town and get alcohol.
Absolutely.
Like, easier and cheaper, probably.
Absolutely.
Straight on
I'm
Instagram.
I'm an open user of cannabis, and I've got a lot of people on my Instagram accounts that maybe other people will be like, maybe you shouldn't have them on your Instagram account, but the amount of, I mean, it's almost been commercialised. You guys that are
Social media
selling it to
huge,
you.
yeah. I done an investigation with the Times, I think, last year or
Okay.
the year before, and how people were using social media to sell drugs. And then people locally were targeting other people deliberately who they knew were trying to get better. So it became a big issue for us because people we were supporting were being affected by that.
So
But
like they were approaching them on social media.
yeah.
When they were trying to get
telling
clean.
them that they're selling stuff, or they've got some stuff for sale, or so you not even having to leave your house.
Actually, that's literally
And
preying on weakness.
Then turning the postman into a drug dealer, because that's what they've done. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I've received cannabis through the post before, so, and from Canada. So, but
Excellent.
the
Several postmen are now criminals now because of you.
the amount of, like I said, the adverts, like we've I think I've spoke, maybe on the podcast, but we spoke about this in private, the way that it's changed. Like, it used to be a really intimidating thing. I can remember going to the guy's flat in Cranhill
Terrified.
for like my first £8 bit of hash, and you're shitting yourself going up and chapping this
Oh, aye.
door. But now,
get the
like,
demon dog.
it is literally like getting a takeaway.
Yeah.
You can send a text, somebody will be here in 15 minutes, and that isn't even just, I mean, people will be like, but you're talking about weed. That's everything. I mean,
Oh.
you literally get a menu, or like, you want this, you want Coke, you want pills, you want whatever, like Xanax, whatever it might be. And ultimately, what you're getting is, you don't know.
No,
You don't know what
you don't
you're
know.
getting.
Definitely not. I think a lot of the stuff that's coming in now, it isn't from Scotland, or it isn't even created in this country. So people are risking their lives on a daily basis, especially with the type of drugs that people are choosing to take just now.
Or the
But
combinations of drugs that seems to be the
also,
thing.
young people are getting targeted. They are being groomed, like, so kids that maybe have, I don't know, that have not had the greatest upbringing now are being targeted to be drug dealers or couriers. Like, I see it all the time.
Yep.
Young girls as well being groomed by...
That's quite. That's
Yeah.
that's a long-standing thing.
Yeah,
though,
that's
isn't it?
gone on for a
it
long,
used
long
to-
time.
We guys used to be like the
But
sort
they're
of
not-
foot soldiers, didn't they? They used to,
They
like,
don't even hide it anymore. Like, they don't hide it anymore. Like, it's not...
Yeah.
I think the freedom social media has given people has then created that in the community as well, you know?
It's make it so much more difficult to track the traffic related to like drug purchases or in Glasgow. I mean, I know there's guys that will literally, you text them and they'll walk up to you in Glasgow, middle of Glasgow city centre and hand after you and not even think twice about it.
I knew a guy
You
that
know what
used
I mean?
to camp out at the Four Corners in the McDonald's. Now, I've not heard for this guy in ages. I'm going to assume that he's in jail or something. He literally, his office was the upstairs in the McDonald's doing it.
High streets like that in Dundee, like, there's a group of guys that do the full circle the whole day, like, right round the high street and the back. And it sees, like... You wonder what the police are actually doing about this issue, because if they're not tackling it on social media and they're allowing it to go on in the community in your high streets when
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And then in the schemes, it's like a free for all.
Yeah.
What are they
And
actually?
It makes a bit of a joker, the criminalisation, when, and
I think this is
something
part of
moving
it, though. I
towards
think
us.
the decriminalisation they've been pushing that for the last 3 or 4 years now. And I think the step back from the police is because of that, to prove that they need to decriminalise it. It's like an argument for it, isn't it? So, yeah, I'm a bit of a cynic when it comes to stuff like that.
What kind of impact do you think decriminalising all drugs, let's just say that they just went down the route where they just went, right, it's no longer a criminal offence to consume or buy drugs, but obviously the dealers are, that's a different thing, because that's completely different. But do you think it would have, because we were talking about this off mic, that the minimum, not the minimum price in alcohol, the legalisation of weed in America seems to have, the consumption between 15 and 21s went through the floor, whereas the argument that was always made was that if we legalise this, all that you're going to see is teenagers, the uptake amongst teenagers is just going to go through the roof. But Holland, Amsterdam's another one, but the teenagers just don't do it.
The thing is,
in comparison
if
to
you
here,
make something illegal, then when you're told not to do something, even though it's from your parents or somebody, the first thing you're going to do when you're able to do it is do it.
Is what I try it.
Yeah, exactly. If you take that away, then there's no mystery around it. People know it's acceptable.
People are educated
Exactly.
properly and paying in terms of tax and stuff
I worry
like
about
that.
decriminalisation because other countries that have done it, they've overhauled their whole system.
Yeah,
Like
Portugal's a good example of
and
that.
the way they're trying to frame it in Scotland is, we need this safe injection rooms, blah, 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 and that they're all great. And they would help a tiny portion of people. But I think for decriminalisation to work, the whole system needs to be overhauled, and that is never going to happen. Definitely not.
It's a shame, because I mean, even in terms of like reading up myself, I know we've talked pretty extensively about heroin and like methadone and things like that. So as much as Paul's using examples that relate to like weed, people at home will be going, well, weed's one thing, it's what about heroin? I mean, I think Norway, when they began the process of like it was decriminalising, they started as a test with like inhaling heroin, like smoking heroin. And they were saying that in the first 4 years of that, the death rate halved. Went from something like 290 something to like 140 something in the space of like 3 or 4 years. So even the decriminalisation of heroin has at least some sort of statistical validity in terms of it's not just weed, or it's not just this. Like this is an actual practice that in huge places in South America, huge places in Eastern Europe, Western Europe in terms of Portugal, and now obviously things that we are considering, even Scandinavia, places all across Scandinavia have various incarnations of these things, and like they all have a level of success behind them. Like, so I can get why we need to maybe think about that as part of our conversation. You know what I mean? Like, my concern about the conversation is not necessarily that that's where we are. Like, people are like, the war on drugs probably hasn't worked. Like, where prohibition almost never works anywhere. And then, obviously the conversation moves on to, so what's next? Which, right now is drug decriminalisation. But like, part of that conversation for me has become really muddy in terms of kind of like what I feel is maybe political point scoring and like finger pointing and stuff like that. So I'm looking at it, and I seen a quote for a current sort of SNP candidate at their party conference saying, we wanted decriminalisation of drugs, but our hands are tied by a Westminster issue. But then I looked at the actual devolved powers of the Scottish Parliament after that, because it didn't feel right. And the Scottish Parliament's got power on health, public health, law and order. Like, so I mean, I don't get where the disconnect is. Is it that Westminster is actually tying people's hands, or is it that the Scottish Government could be doing more? Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I mean, based on what I've experienced the last 3 years and what we've achieved, just a small community group that's gone national and
international.
Even further than that. If we can do that in 3 years and keep the majority of people that have probably been in the drug services for decades, then there is ways and means that we've got in Scotland to do that right now. And to me, it's wasting time. The political arguments for and against, they didn't interest me, but obviously my work means I have to take an interest in that.
Of course.
I think decriminalisation is, I think independence is more what our government is pushing for, and that is part of it, which
Okay.
upsets me a lot, because I think that people are dying, and whilst people are dying, then there should be a lot more done.
And this is my concern as well, because I see policies on, you know, and as I'm a recovering alcoholic, like the minimum price in alcohol, the talk of decriminalisation, like, so that there is, you know, wiggle room. There's chat about, you know, as you say, safe shooting, you know, rooms and stuff like that. The increase of, is it Nandrolone or Nandrox, or the anti-overdose drug?
Naloxone.
Naloxone, sorry, being made available. So there is like stuff that can be done. You know what I mean? Like, but yet we still see that. I think we're like, what, 4 times the European average in drug deaths in Scotland. Like, so I don't get what the disconnect is. If we can help people, why are we not doing it? And if we can't help people, how do we go about making the change that we need to actually like facilitate that change? You know what I mean?
I think a lot of focus has been on harm reduction and treatment, and when they're selling recovery or saying get into recovery, the people that are telling you that don't actually know what that means. Like, they've never experienced it. So it's been near on impossible for anybody before 10 years ago to really get better without the fellowship or without rehab or something like that. The landscape's changing, but I think that there's so much we can do without like having to go to Westminster. I mean, I was in Westminster and me giving evidence at the Scottish Affairs Committee.
Okay.
And it was a great experience. The evidence we gave was used, but the conclusions they came to were exactly the same as what the Dundee Commission came to, bar on decriminalisation and other policies that were added on to that. But I think that would be reiterated in every city, and the Commission report should be used as a blueprint for people moving forward. They've only got 12 recommendations that just touch basically on what needs to change. That the changes should be, the people that work in the services should be implementing them at the best of their abilities. Anybody that's been working in drug service for longer than 5 years needs to be moved on to another job, because if you're working with people that are emotionally needing support or with mental health issues, it tells on you, and the way your empathy and connection to that person is gone. Like, you can't build that relationship.
So like drug services, as we were talking about them earlier on, are saying that if you're providing them, it should be on almost a kind of like rotational basis to protect yourself from burnout and stuff like that.
You wouldn't have somebody on A&E for 10 years.
Right.
Like, you'd have to move them. Like, you wouldn't have somebody on a psychiatric unit all that time. And I think with the added pressure of society and what people think of drug users, all them things come into account when you're giving somebody treatment or you're working with them. Your own personal view, whether you want to admit it or not, will come into how that person is treated when they walk through that door. And I think that there's people that have been working in them services for far too long.
Yeah, okay. It's something that I would have never, as much as I consider burnout in my own job and with, you know, my own teams and stuff like that, like I would have never, it's just never even crossed my mind that the people providing these services themselves, you know,
I've only learned that through
serious
experience.
risk.
I'm somebody in recovery that supports people in recovery, and I have to take time out. I need to. If I don't, I can't.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. It's just the thought had never crossed my mind.
Yeah,
that
it totally drains you, and it's hard because you just want somebody to get better. You want to do the best for them, and if you've already got issues yourself or not functioning the way you should,
Absolutely.
it's going to affect how you treat that person, how you view them, and the outcome of that.
Absolutely.
Why do you think Scotland's so like badly affected by drug deaths? I mean, with the highest in Europe.
Poverty is a huge issue.
Do you think it's just coming down to like the level
Not
of poverty?
just, I mean, we support people that are middle class who've got issues.
Yeah.
Like, that happens. I'm not saying that doesn't, but I think for places like where I live in housing schemes and that, you're talking about 3 generations of people that have not worked, that have been on benefits. You've got the first generation, then second, now the third generation. They don't know any different. They're not inspiring to be, because they think that's what the way life is. So I think then they're stuck in that rut, and the cycle continues, and that it's been allowed to happen. I think,
It's absolutely criminal.
It just seems
You'd
strange
have
that
2 or 3 4 generations of a family all addicted to that. It just baffles me completely.
I mean, I've seen it. When we're talking, I'm thinking about specific families that I grew up around, and
Well,
I can remember the
did we allow it
kids.
to get that bad? I get that it's a
Well,
real
that's
thing, you know
it.
what I mean?
I
Like,
can
but-
remember the kid.
This
like,
is the issue I have. Like,
one, the dad, this specific family, the dad was in jail for dealing drugs, and the youngest kid at the time, and I'm thinking is like 4 or 5, and I'm walking to school, and the wee guy's sitting outside in his jammies. Do you know what I mean? Literally just left.
Yeah.
Because his ma's a heroin addict, his big brother and his big sister are heroin addicts, and that's what I was thinking earlier on. I was like, they don't have a chance. Like,
No.
I think that this is where the big, massive misconception. So, I mean, on that point, like, how many of the addicts that you encounter have traumatic childhoods or experience trauma at a young age?
so everybody I'm working with or are connected to the group right now, they've all experienced trauma in their childhood from one degree or another. Like, trauma to one person could not mean anything to another person.
Of course.
Like losing a grandparent, watching your dad get arrested, somebody dying, a breakup, whatever, child abuse, it goes right up. But people always think of the worst case scenario.
Of course.
But for some, it's not like that. I think we see and try to identify as soon as we meet somebody the point in which started their addiction or at least propelled them into being primed for being an addict in later life. And we can do that within an hour. And then the person fares really well. And although they will have to deal with a lot of emotional shit that they've probably avoided for a long time, it happens and it's working. Like,
I don't think any recovery is. Yeah, I don't. You know, it's all messy. It's all going to be hard work. You know what I mean?
You've got, on top of getting into recovery, you've also got to live your life, and then you've got kids and families, and the emotional shit is triggered by all the other stuff. So stuff that might not even be related to your recovery will trigger something from your past, and dealing with that is like a fucking mountain of shite on top of your head, trying to breathe, and it's difficult.
Like a house of cards sometimes.
And if you've never experienced it or don't know anybody that's experienced it, that stuff is overwhelming, and you run right back to your coping mechanism,
that's
whatever
it.
that is. Yeah.
So, I mean, it sounds to me like one of the big disconnects in terms of where we are as a country and where, you know, we need to be is like the disconnect between policy and like reality. So it sounds to me as though you're saying that the people who are in charge of formulating and creating policy are maybe approaching it for like an academic or sort of political point of view in a lot of cases, but they don't have that like real, you know, life experience that actually, you know, lived experience or however we want to process it. How do we bridge that gap? Because one of the things I was talking about in a short we're releasing was about connecting local groups to the system. And I think that we've got a lot of great local groups in Glasgow like yourselves.
Yeah.
And, you know, I really sort of stressed NHS and, you know, public services. Now, I think some of the burden could be relieved by finding a way to bridge or connect these, you know, well-meaning groups with the system. So, like, you were saying you guys act as a kind of buffer in Dundee. Like, do you have, like, an actual connection to
So yeah, it took
the
me
more systemic services?
3 years to be able to connect with the NHS on a level where I believe that we will actually make a difference, and that just happened 3 weeks ago. So that's
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean we've helped write policies and structured stuff with the council for years, and we're just starting to get taken seriously now. I think the reason for that is because they don't understand what a recovery community should be.
Yeah.
They believe that they can put on social events and do different things, and that's a community. Communities were ripped out of communities 3 decades ago.
Yeah.
So people have forgot what that's like.
Sitting people together in a room, isn't it, making a community?
We say that we will complement any other service that exists. We are there to complement what they do, and vice versa. That should be the same. That's not happening yet, but it's starting to change. It definitely is. And the platform I've created, I'm very lucky. Like, I never planned any of this. Like, I just wanted to get out of fucking hell and live my life. But there's been a stage in between that's not going to happen yet. But that doesn't happen for everybody, and community groups like ours struggle really difficult. Dan McGarvey donated £5,000 to us this year in January, and that's kind of kept us tiding by until we can get our social enterprise. But without that, we wouldn't be here this year. Like, we would have had to.
That's frightening.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, $5,000's nothing.
No, it's definitely not. But that's
you know
run
what I mean?
every group, every event, everything for the whole of this year for us. And if we can do that with £5,000, can you imagine how much a difference we would make with
like salaries and
just the
people
normal
doing it full
wage?
time and
So,
stuff
and
like
that's
that.
the aim. Like, we want to employ young people. We want to employ people that are starting to get in recovery, might not be able to function. I mean, the first 2 years of your recovery, you're not working a full-time job, because if you are, you're going to lose it. Like, and people don't know how to support people in recovery because they've never done it before.
Yep.
And the services are employing peers. 2 years down the line, they're fucking up, they're losing everything because they've not supported them in the way they should. We want to change that and kind of show people how you can employ peers, how you can employ young people, how you can do all these things, get the best out of them, but also give them the opportunity to get their lives back themselves, you know?
I think this is like the crux here, is that they are giving people the opportunity to fix themselves and get their life back, because it's almost it seems like people get babied, they're dealt like children.
As soon as you go to a service, you're giving your own power away, because you're believing the person across the table from you is going to fix you or give you the answers to what you've been looking for the last fucking 30 years. Now, that person doesn't know you from Adam, so unless you're telling them your whole fucking life story since the day you were born until that point, how is he supposed to help you, really, essentially, in a 15-minute appointment that you might get every 6 months? It's not possible. And NHS are amazing. They do a great job, but I think addiction and the services for mental health are so far off the mark.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
It's scary.
It's fucking ridiculous.
Well, in Dundee, they're way to combine the two worst services, the drug service and the mental health service, and put them together. And I said...
two issues that are often, like, intrinsically linked to each other, you know what I mean?
See, I have an issue with that as well, because...
Not always, obviously, but...
I think when we class emotional health as mental health, and there is a big difference. They're both connected, 100% they are. But if one is off balance, the other one will be. You have to get them in tandem. And I think we find that people who are maybe just coming off methadone and they then get treatment for their mental health, they're diagnosed with borderline personality. I don't even know how it's possible to have a borderline personality disorder.
You've either got it, you don't.
Or you don't. I say to people, you've not got borderline personality disorder, you've got a personality, but...
Yeah.
And then 2 years down the line, they're getting told that it was a misdiagnosis. So they spent 2 years thinking, whilst they're trying to get better and deal with all the other shit, that there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
So it muddies the water a lot.
This is a huge problem that I've got with a lot of the sort of chat around mental health is that, unfortunately, and this isn't like, I know that you get accused of like blaming victims and victim blaming, right? But if you've just been through an addiction where you've maybe been with an abusive partner, or you've done things that you wouldn't have done had you not been on the drugs, and then you start coming off the drugs, of course you're going to be emotionally unstable, of course you're going to need some help, but you're not mentally unwell.
No.
Already you're why are you being diagnosed with an illness that
before
is not the case?
Before that, if say, for instance, you're on methadone and you stop taking methadone, your body is not producing the chemicals in the brain that it should be to make you feel okay. So for however long your body's not functioning the way it should, which would be 2 or 3 years after you stop using methadone.
Okay. So it impacts you for that long?
Yeah, I mean, I still struggle now. There's like days I can't even leave the house. I can't answer the phone. I can't speak to anybody. I've got PTSD, obviously, and that affects... I get triggered with different things, and I found ways to deal with that, and I can function more than not.
Yeah.
But some people will never get to that stage because they're in relation to their own mental health and their emotional health. They're then getting told they're diagnosed with something else. So instead of thinking the issue lies with them, it's because they're not well. So then they don't do the work to get better because they resign themselves to the fact they've got a mental health issue that can't be dealt with. It's blah, blah, blah. And it's actually scary because I think there's 4 or 5 people now that are 2 years down the line, and they were all diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, and all told 2 years later that it was a misdiagnosis. And that's 4 people we know of.
It sounds so weird that, maybe weird's not the word, but like when somebody has already went through the process of getting themselves clean, that, you would think that would empower them to like address other issues in their lives and stuff like that, but you're saying that in a lot of cases it's actually the opposite. Because I know when I have went through periods of drying out or, sort of cleaning up my act and whatnot, that at the other side, I found myself quite rewarded for actually like taking that control back and stuff like that. But in other people, that's just not there. I find it weird that somebody would take the first step, but then, maybe fought the second. But then I suppose everybody's experience is their own, and everybody's different. So.
Yeah, once you give your power away to somebody else who tells you that they're getting better, and then that person tells you you're unwell, you're not going to make as much effort to get better as you would have done because you already think there's something else wrong with you,
Something overarching.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, like, for instance, like, our recovery story is a story of somebody who has just decided to take the bull by the horns instead of going somewhere and them going, right, here's the crutch that you need.
Yeah.
And then, right, in fact, actually, you're sick. Here's another drug. Like, you need this for your personality disorder, and then you end up just sitting going, like, what the fuck is wrong with me?
Aye.
Like, there's something clearly wrong with me. And like you're saying, they're not getting that emotional help. Or, I mean, the amount of these problems it could probably, if they had a therapist.
Yes.
And they could sit and they could speak to somebody that's going to speak to them potentially about their childhood. Like, the idea, when I first, I studied to become a mental health professional, and when I heard about ACEs, it was somebody that was on my course that was working in ACEs, and they told me, and they stood up, I think the lecturer was like, you need to do a talk about this, because everybody in the class was looking at each other going,
gobsmacked.
What is this? Like, what? And then when they laid out the 12 adverse childhood experiences that make you more susceptible to addiction, fucking jaw hit the floor. I was like, I've got 4 of them, and everybody I know's got at least 4 or 5 of them. Like,
I had them all except for dying. That was the only one that I didn't reach. Yeah, but I nearly reached that as well. But I think the ACEs and the stuff that they talk about through ACEs is amazing. I think Gabor Mate's a brilliant guy. I think that they've brought it into Scotland and started blunting it out. I don't think people are educated enough to then apply it to what they're doing. That will come. It has to develop, but it also kind of puts people at risk a little bit. If you've not trauma informed, you've not gone through trauma yourself, or you don't know, then it's scary for me. I think. I think if it's done right, and people.
It's all since I heard about it 2 years ago, and the way that it's spoke about online, it's almost like people went, here we go, this is it, we found it, don't worry,
it's the answer.
It was huge for me. It was huge
it's huge for me as well, but I think that when we're speaking, what's becoming apparent to me is that everybody's road to addiction is very, very different, and everybody's road out to it is going to be equally as different. There isn't going to be a cookie cutter, but that's almost like, and you're saying societal problems, that's almost like the Holy Grail, is if we can find a cookie cutter where we can just push people and just do that, and that means that you'll be fine. Yeah. It doesn't really work like that, does it?
I think I found ACEs myself when I was starting my recovery, and looking through it, I was able to identify a lot of things which helped myself do that. But people that are not informed that way won't be inclined to go down that road. And then if they're going to professionals that are just banding about ACEs, which they do in Dundee, they all think they're experts.
They love it.
I mean, I think chatting about it because it's like whatever they.
Well, I suppose the funding streams will change. So for recovery and for ACEs,
so they need to adapt.
The funding, and you've got services that were gateway services. So if you needed to go and get a treatment for addiction, you'd go to a gateway service like Addiction or somewhere like that. Addiction in Dundee is now the recovery service for Dundee, which blows my mind. There's not one service that can be one service for recovery anywhere. Recovery is different for every single person. You're going to access a million different things yourself, and I think it's very arrogant to say you're the recovery service for one city, because no, you're not, mate. Definitely not.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite a big challenge, I suppose, and as much as we've been probably slightly critical of, or maybe majorly critical, I don't know how people will take it, I like government and, the services that are provided. Like, on the flip side of it, like, providing funding, structure, policy on something that is so subjective has got to be, like, an absolutely gigantic challenge. And I think that's probably where the advocacy of groups like yours is absolutely most important. Do you think that, I know you were saying that the NHS have been a bit reluctant or maybe taking time to like adapt to you, but for other people and other groups who are listening to this and thinking the next step for us is to try and engage with you know, the machinery around us? Like, if you get like tips, or is it just be patient and be blip?
Just, yeah, you have to, like, if you think that you're going to change everything right from the get-go, it's been 3 years of really hard work, pounding the streets and continuously, like, engaging with, I mean, now we don't have to. We do our thing, they do their thing. If there's something going on and we can work together, cool. But we want to be separate from that so then people can go in and out. But I think as far as, I don't know, lived experience, and in my view, it's not valued the way it should be.
Right.
If somebody was at uni that done 10 years of a PhD and was an expert on it, and I think the same goes for somebody that's lived through 10 years of living hell and come out the other side, because
Absolutely.
in reality, I should be dead, and probably half of the rest of the people that are in recovery now should be dead. I think recovery going forward will be much more easier to access for people trying to do that. But yeah, I think government and councils locally, I think councils use lived experience for their own means. So they will engage with us, and whatever they learn, they will use to adapt for what they need. There's no crossover or trying to work together yet. I think we've done a few things with council, and I've always engaged with them, working with them.
Yeah.
Because if I didn't, I wouldn't be changing it. Like,
Of course.
Government, I think, so far removed from the issues that Scotland face, even Scottish government.
Right.
I think for us to tackle these issues, I think locally there needs to be more power for councils and places like that. But whether that'll happen or not,
It's all right, don't worry about
It happens all the time.
it. People's phones going off.
that's my. Can I answer this?
Aye, on you go.
It's my mother-in-law. Sorry. Hello. Hi. Are you okay?
Gotta leave this in.
Are you in Grants? Are you in my house? No, I'm not in the house, mate. I'm in Glasgow. Right, I have to do it in a minute because I'm working just now, okay? I'll phone you back when I'm done, right? I won't be long. No, Auntie Audrey's not here. Yeah, what? Right, when you listen, I'll speak to you. I'll phone you back, right? I'll phone you back. You're being a wido now, go away. My 7-year-old son. Shouldn't be let loose on a phone, Mike.
I'm going to leave that in. Just for
Yeah, he's quite funny.
what were we talking about there?
The difficulty of connecting like groups like recovery cafes and whatnot to the actual machinery and about them. Because I think that, as I say, I think that's the way forward for me, is actually taking people who are experts in the field of these lived experiences that you're, you know,
They need to
obviously
be
references
valued
like
in the way they, like the knowledge they have. There's no way they can change services and change the culture of recovery, drugs, whatever, without speaking to people that have lived it. I think in the past it's been very tokenistic. That's changing. I mean, I'm proof of that. I mean, I wouldn't be doing the things I'm doing if it wasn't valued a bit more than it has been. But
absolutely,
I think government, as I said, and council are so far removed from the issues that are locally to housing schemes, to communities. I think that unless they do, they're never going to address the issue in a way that's going to save people or make it not the worst issue that Scotland's got right
Absolutely.
now. You know?
I think like when you were talking earlier, right back at the start of the episode, about how we educate kids on like
It's a big
drug use.
stickler for me. Like,
Well, it's just about like this is the effects and blah blah blah, and here's just the
you've
list
got
of drugs.
people that have never took drugs going to school
Yeah.
telling kids not to take drugs, and to me it's like, okay, then it's like your gran or your mum saying, don't do that, please. And they educate them, they show them some of the stuff is fine, but you're talking about kids from housing schemes predominantly where I'm living, that their only education is through drug dealers or people. Like, they don't know they're
they've
in other
seen
sites.
the stuff that's sitting in glass jars on the case
These kids
on the
probably
street
know
already.
more about drugs than the fucking teachers.
People that are actually
yeah,
presenting
so you've got to come to their level on it and understand. And we work with an off-site school in Dundee, so kids that don't fare well in mainstream. So a lot of the kids are affected by addiction, alcoholics, parents, and people addicted to other drugs. I always, every time I go there and speak every 6 months, one of the kids from that school will come to the community, and we've helped them into housing, college and stuff like that. And we're not telling them anything. They're learning from everybody around them. They're seeing that somebody's been on heroin for 40 years. They're seeing that there's 3 generations. They're living and breathing people getting better and being proactive about their own communities. And I think that's the best way to educate anybody is to let them see this, the way to find solutions and problem solving.
The actual realities for
and
themselves.
And let them be involved in that. Once they value their own community, they're going to value keeping it so people are getting better. They're going to always contribute in some sort of way. And it's...
And once that example's set for them, it's something that stays with them.
Yes.
And unfortunately, in a lot of places around Scotland and Dundee in particular, like, the example that's been set for them is the wrong one. You know what I mean?
I mean, this is something that we keep coming across time and time again with people is that the destruction of the community in the 70s and 80s when the country got deindustrialised and
still happening now.
Yeah, has been a disaster, has been an absolute mitigated disaster, and it's ended up with people feeling isolated. And I'm just thinking about, like, earlier on we did bash social media, and we were like, people were being able to take advantage of social media for them to use it as like a selling tool, because that's what they're doing. They're using Snapchat as a way of advertising. They're out and about in their motor and they're selling drugs, but also I feel like it's all on the flip side of that, social media has had quite a lot to do with bringing people together.
100%. Like people thought I was a manager of Ad Action for the first year we were online, which was quite amusing at times. And it's created a brilliant platform for us. I think, like everything, like community or everything's got a bad side. I just think the bad side of social media is being run. Like there is no policing of it. There's no accountability from these platforms that are making millions of pounds off people every day. So I think that there's a way to tackle that issue. But yeah, social media for us has been huge. Like, you can't be an activist without going on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you end up with people? Did you say earlier on, like, New York or something like that?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting one. So a guy from Dundee lives in New York, and obviously seen the documentary that we did, and he had a family member that needed support, so he contacted me through email. We had a member go to meet a guy from Australia. He was a heroin user for 40 years, and he got the naltrexone implant over there. So he was like the first guinea pig there to get it.
Okay.
So what's that?
So it's an implant that it can last for 6 months or a year. It's not an opiate, it's like a blocker. So it puts stuff in between the receptors in the brain.
Okay.
So
if you take heroin,
you wouldn't get anything. Right. So for heroin and opiate use, there's 100% success rate, and for other drugs, it's like 60-70%.
Okay.
We will get that to Dundee. We've already started.
Are you an advocate?
Yeah, I think it's another option for people. I'm not saying it's going to work for everybody, but
as many options as we can get.
Exactly.
But so, I mean, as much as it's affecting the brain and blocking, the proteins or whatever it is that generate the,
also gives you a clear
addictive.
mind to be in recovery, so you're not medicated.
I'm assuming the body still goes through withdrawal.
Yeah, so I think if you're on opiates, you have to be 4 days clean from them, and they will help you with the withdrawals to that.
Right.
Once you're on that, then I think you're okay. But I don't think they can give it to you if you've got opiates in your system.
Right.
I think methadone takes a few days longer. It's maybe 5 or 6 days before you can get the implant. But I say to people, like, they're only 5 days. Like, you've done 5 days before without heroin. So, and at the end of it, you're going to be moving forward. Like I say, it's not for everybody.
Anything that will help is worth having on the table, but isn't it?
Something that was, I mean, we're starting to see a lot of research that there are other illegal drugs that can help you with, like, coming off harder drugs. So there's loads of stuff going about, like,
This is like microdosing,
like psilocybin, microdosing MDMA. Cannabis is one that's used quite, I think, is something that's probably just happened in the community where people have managed to help. I mean, I was saying off mic that I knew a guy that was desperately wanted off heroin, I think 99, something like that. It was a mate of my sister's boyfriend, and he managed to get himself off by his family locking him in the room with hash, and then he just obviously he's went through. Are they? So I think with psilocybin and things like, I think it's different, but with like cannabis, is it just helping you get through the symptoms of withdrawal?
I used it at the start, and I've periodically, when I've been triggered with my PTSD, I've used that to get past that stage. It's like a coping tool. It's not, I don't use it all the time, but
Of course.
I think that it worked for me, and it works for me when I need it. I think other people would be the same. I think everybody's different, their biology is different, so what works for one person won't work for another. I know people that can't smoke cannabis in the first year of being off opiates. Like, it just drives them like to paranoia, and it causes all sorts of
course.
But I think if it's done properly in a controlled environment, then there's huge benefits for that.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
I think there's loads of stuff about, we're talking about CBD, which is a non-psychoactive chemical that's found in cannabis, and that helps people just by like sort of calm. It's like a sort of calming agent and stuff. But with PTSD, there's tons and tons of stuff on, especially like MDMA, and that to me is like mind blowing that they could use
Ecstasy, essentially.
Yeah, to try and help people.
It was already like, to start with, ecstasy. That MDMA was used for mental health issues. That's how it was born. Like the history of it.
Really? I never knew that.
Yeah.
No, I never did that.
Yeah,
No
look
idea.
it up. Like in America, they used it like decades and decades ago for mental health treatment, and I think don't quote me, it might not be true. Schizophrenia and stuff like that.
Okay.
And
I know obviously like the hallucinogenics, LSD and such were all, thoroughly experimented in those terms as well, but as I say, I've got no real connection with the microdosing side. I think, if people find something that works for them, and it's no,
once you
harming
learn
them.
self-control, like if something's, like if you have self-control, then something like that would work for you, but if you've not got self-control,
You're going to overdo it again,
you could go so far the other way. So you've got to be very careful with
I think
it.
that's something that we take a lot of self-control away from people nowadays, don't we? It's almost like, no, see, if you're going through this is what will work for you. You need to take that.
Yep.
And we don't really. There's a lack of buckle down and just get yourself through it, and just realise that you're going to crave, and but you need to get yourself to the other side of the tunnel or whatever it is.
I think when the drug service success rate in Dundee is like 1.7%, that's
crazy.
Yeah, that's true. And so me and my friend who come off methadone, we had no point of reference. Like the first 5 years, everything I know I learnt from her. And if I didn't know what she'd been through, there's no way I could be at the point I am now. And I think that we took back control. We took back control of what we needed to do ourselves. And I think, as I said before, taking away someone's power, be it with a doctor or a nurse or something, like you're automatically making it, like putting a barrier in their way to get better.
Yeah.
And I don't think people understand that, because nobody in the NHS or a doctor goes to work thinking, I'm going to make it difficult for somebody.
How do I hinder this person's recovery?
Exactly, that doesn't happen.
No.
Like
I think
and
it's
this is where
union as well. There's a
yeah.
union thing where I thought of the inner child, and when you're put into positions of feeling like there's an authority figure, you revert back to what the way that you were when you felt that sort of.
So
like,
when a doctor's coming out, you're more compliant
Yeah,
because he's an authority figure.
They
but
say
also, if
you're
your triggers stemming from your childhood and that's what's caused you to become an addict in the first place, you're getting looped right the way back to that.
And
then
issue was
like
with authority
Groundhog Day.
figures.
exactly.
I think
right.
that when somebody's addicted in their teens, like or had trauma in their childhood, and you're going to a service, like they say, when you stop using methadone, you revert back to the age you were when you first started. So
Right.
we've got thousands of adolescents running about in adult bodies.
And people whose heads haven't been clear for 30 years.
They've never lived as adults. They've never lived in society as a productive
Again, that's one that makes perfect sense when you hear it, but I've never
You never
even
think
thought about it
about
like that.
it.
That
Man.
something takes 30 years of your life when you actually finally clear your head. You know no more than a teenager does.
Absolutely
Yes.
zero clarity.
You've no point of reference.
Aye, that's mental.
Yeah.
You've got zero clarity.
Can you imagine how terrifying that is?
Jesus Christ. I mean, it's taken me, 30 whatever years, can't even remember now. But anyway, 30-something years to, you know, even come to terms with myself in even the very basic of terms, like to go through 30 years of torment and then come out the other side of it as a grown-up and knowing as much about the world as a teenager would be. I don't know. I mean, fair play to anybody who does that journey and comes out the other side of it, because they're absolute warriors, man.
This is where when we did the Aces episode with James, we get a couple, like, I think I might have mentioned it already, where it was like, nah, that's just an excuse and you're only responsible for yourself. And like, I grew up in a scheme and my dad battered my mum, but I didn't end up an addict. And I think that, well, great for you, mate. Like, I'm great for you, pal. Like, yeah. I really like admire you, but at the same time, like that's not the same for everybody. Like, everybody's story is very, very different.
I think everybody deals with emotions differently, and if you've already had issues in your childhood where you deal with any emotional issue negatively or have a negative response to it, that's not going to change when you get into adolescence if you've not got somebody teaching you how to be emotionally balanced. Yep. That won't change going into your 20s. That's just going to get worse because you see loads of other people around you managing to navigate life and you just cannot cope. You cannot cope. And for whatever reason, you can't identify that. And it stems back to your childhood, whether people want to say, oh, that's a cop-out or not. Who's going to be responsible for all the child abuse and neglect that went on in the 80s and 90s that created the addicts now? Are we going to hold the adults responsible from back then? Mm-hmm. Or the adults that are trying to be adults that are actually children inside? It blows my mind when people go, it's a choice. You choose to take drugs or you can choose to stop. I'm like, when you become an addict, there is no choice. Like, that choice is gone.
Yeah.
Like, your choice is gone. You've gave up that power, and you're now a slave to whatever drug or alcohol it is.
I think these people need to realise, especially in the face of, you know, multi-generational addiction, particularly, which, and, you know, this conversation has been the most sort of heartbreaking element for me. That's the one that will stay with me after this conversation, is that there's multiple generations of families who suffer for basically the same illness. You know what I mean? Like, it's an illness that has been grown out of personal circumstance, environment, history, and any number of other things. But at the same time, as you say, if you're born in an impoverished area of Dundee, the statistical likelihood, given that your parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles and whoever else happen to also be drug addicts, that you will then be a drug addict is, you know,
the worst thing I find
it's the opposite of a lot of figures, isn't it? It's almost a dead set that that's who you're going to be.
You're primed to be an addict. Yeah. I find most difficult in the work I do now is when you meet young people that are maybe 18, 21, 24, and you know they tell you your family history, and you know at some point they're either going to get wise and move forward or they are going to be addicts, and there's absolutely nothing you can do to stop it. Like, you've just got to watch it unfold and be there. It's quite horrible. Upsetting, yeah.
Well, that's, I mean, we're over the hour. It's been a cracking conversation.
I really enjoyed this one, if that's the word for it, to be honest with you.
I know, as much as you can enjoy a conversation, but this is the type of things that we want to talk about to put out in the podcast, because we're just so passionate about, like, helping people and making people realise that there is things that can be done to sort of intervene as well. But thanks very much for coming in and talking.
Yeah, I really appreciate making the time.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And you came all the way from Dundee just for this, because you were in the BBC.
I know, yeah. Well, I've got a couple of mates to meet, so it's not too bad. Not too bad. Get a night out as well. So.
Get a wee beer in the Scotland game, and
Oh yeah, God, yeah.
But again, thanks very much for coming.
No worries, thank you. Thanks.